Welcome, everybody. Please join us in welcoming Haben Girma today to Google. She is Harvard Law graduate, the first deafblind graduate from Harvard Law School. And she is a pioneer in everything that has to do with technology for accessibility. So she has been helping very in-depth with developing technology that is useful for people with disabilities. She is also a disability rights advocates member and encourages the development of any sorts of accessible technology. She's here today to talk to us about how technology has enabled her to be where she is today. And she also encourages all of us being at Google to help with further development of these types of technologies. And with me, I have Amrit, who has gotten to know Haben at Harvard Law School, so he'll tell you a little bit more of a personal story about her.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you all for coming. I'm sure, as Aprajita's introduction kind of foretold, and as you've probably seen in Haben's bio and everything else that's written about her in many different places, she's an incredible, inspiring, kind of influential person. But Aprajita and Gopika asked me just to share just a quick personal anecdote. And the one thing I wanted to say, and the truth is you'll see this very soon, is that Haben is one of the most optimistic, encouraging, and curious people that I've ever met. And I think that's one of the things that I think really shines out about her. Some of you will think you hear this in her voice, but you'll really sense it is in the words that she's saying. So as Aprajita had mentioned, Haben and I went to law school together actually quite a number of years ago now, which seems strange. And we met in our first year of law school, and in that community, in the law school community, and actually also beyond it, Haben in some ways actually extended my boundaries beyond the law school bubble pretty quickly. She, again, was known for being someone who's just absolutely optimistic, absolutely positive and engaging in that way. And I feel very lucky that she lives here, although sometimes the East Bay feels really, really far away. But I think one thing that I've noticed even here is that Haben's friends are all really fascinating, amazing people, and it's no surprise in a way. The one last thing I wanted to mention was that I had taken, the one thing that I recalled when Gopi had asked if I could just share a few words, is that I had taken Haben to the opera, I guess last year now. And by the way, slight plug, all of you should go to the opera, because Google gives, the San Jose Opera, Google gives like $30 tickets for front row seats, which is an amazing perk. So I used that perk and took Haben with me. And one thing that was very clear was that the perspective that she's able to and willing to and curious enough to share throughout the experience was just in kind of fulfills and even takes further my own experience. She did, during the intermission though, get really excited because we were talking about something that the Opera House could have done better. And she said, "Hey, Amrit, we should sue the Opera House." And I remember thinking in that moment, a note to self that I should never bring Haben to Google. And then Gopi and a project that did just that. But all joking aside, I'm actually very encouraged and happy that Haben is fighting the good fight, fighting these fights, and sometimes that might mean, probably already has meant, but it almost certainly will mean, suing Google in some capacity, or at least challenging Google to do things better. And I'm glad that someone who has, again, that optimism, that curiosity, and that encouragement is the one that's challenging. So that's it. And I should introduce Gopi. Are you going to take over now? No. Gopi's going to take over at some point. You all know him. He's amazing. All right. Without anything else, Haben.
Good afternoon. My name is Haben Girma. I am so grateful to be here. Thank you, Amrit, for the wonderful introduction and reminding me of the opera trip. So I work at Disability Rights Advocates. It's a nonprofit legal center based in Berkeley, and we help increase access for people with disabilities. One of the reasons I'm really excited to be here is that Google has an extraordinary mission to organize the information of the world and make it accessible and useful. In honor of the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, I want to talk about what we can do to make information more accessible for people with disabilities. So first, I want to talk about communication. I'm deafblind, so if you have a question and raise your hand, it's going to be up there for a long time. And if you shout it out, I'm not going to be able to hear it. So for communication, I use a keyboard and Braille display. I'll hold up the Braille display. On the bottom are mechanical pins that pop up to form Braille letters. And when someone types on the keyboard, it shows up in digital Braille. Technology helps a lot of people. And as programmers and technology developers, you really change the lives of people with disabilities. The technology I used was developed by people, and they've changed my life, and they continue to change the lives of others. And all of you here have the power to help people and really change the lives of people. 1 in 4 Americans have a disability at some point in their life. That's a huge segment of the population. It includes the elderly, it includes people who are born with disabilities, and people who have experiences or temporary disabilities. So thinking about designing technologies that will reach these communities and empower them to gain access to information is really, really meaningful. There are a variety of assistive technologies people use. Screen readers are one example. Screen readers are applications that convert graphical information into synthesized speech or digital Braille, like the Braille display I was holding. They serve as bridges that allow blind individuals to access information on screens. So when developers put in hooks for their products and services to connect with screen readers, blind individuals are able to gain access to online services and other products. Another feature is closed captioning. Closed captioning are subtitles on the bottom of videos that allow deaf individuals to access the audio content on videos. Closed captioning is a feature that helps the deaf and hard of hearing community, but it also helps other communities. Often, places will have videos with the audio turned off and closed captions turned on. So little things like that end up helping everyone. Keyboard shortcuts are helpful for people with mobility disabilities that affect the use of hands, but they're also helpful for people who just plain don't like using mice. Sometimes faster to use with keyboard shortcuts. So these are all features that people have developed, that engineers, programmers, technology developers have imagined creating and then went through and created, and have changed how people engage with information and engage with each other. Technology has revolutionized all aspects of our lives, from entertainment to reading to shopping. Online shopping has really impacted the lives of people with disabilities in the area of physical access. A lot of stores, physical stores, have physical barriers like stairs that make it hard for someone in a wheelchair to get in and out if there are no accessible entrances. And online shopping gives people the opportunity to bypass those physical obstacles. Chat programs, blogging programs have allowed many communities to start engaging and having conversations that might not have otherwise occurred. Individuals on the autism spectrum, individuals who are deaf or hard of hearing, are now having conversations and connecting and engaging. And programmers and technology developers who have built these programs, like Google Hangouts, have allowed individuals in those communities to connect and share their voices. So as developers of technology, you have a very powerful tool. And in some ways, it's opened many doors. The vast majority of websites and apps are not accessible, but you can change that. It's an incredible gift and tool that you have to change. The process is about designing products from the start with hooks for assistive technology like screen readers, allowing for captioning, allowing for keyboard shortcuts. And when you design it from the start with those features in mind, you're able to ensure that it's going to be accessible, helping people with disabilities participate in the process by allowing for testing at every stage of development. Those are ways to ensure that products can help all Americans. The challenge is continually coming up with ways to ensure that people can connect. Sometimes it's really challenging and you get stuck in a comfort zone where you're doing something just one way, and it becomes difficult to imagine new, exciting ways for sharing information. But this is Google. This is Google with an extraordinary mission to organize the information of the world and make it accessible and useful. I'm not a technology developer. I'm not a programmer. So I don't know all the technical details of the challenges involved. But I do know how hard it is to continue imagining new ways of doing things. One way I connect with people is through dance. I've been dancing for about 10 years. And because I can't hear the music, and I can't see what my dance friends are doing, I had to come up with alternative ways of experiencing rhythm and knowing the dance moves by using my hands. And over 10 years, I've come up with lots of different techniques for accessing the rhythm and the movements. But I realized that there was still one very important thing that I just wasn't picking up. About 2 weeks ago, I was dancing, and during the dance, the guy I was dancing with raised his hand to his face and signed, smiling. I felt so surprised. He's telling me he's smiling? What a beautiful thing to communicate smiling while dancing. It never occurred to me. Smiles are visually available information to most people. And now I know that when I'm dancing, I can tell people, by the way, if you're smiling and you want to tell me, you could sign, smiling. So sometimes it's challenging to think of new ways to do things. But it's a fun challenge and very rewarding. And when you come up with new ways of presenting information, you reach more people. And it moves Google closer to its goal, to its mission of gathering the information and making it accessible and useful. Features that help the disability community often end up helping the greater community. Closed captioning helps people who are deaf or hard of hearing. The text associated with those videos serves as a way to allow for greater, more powerful keyword searches, allowing people to access exactly the video and information they want. So a feature like closed captioning and other assistive technologies end up helping the greater community. I'm really, really excited to see how we all move towards the mission of making information more accessible for everyone. About 25 years ago, Congress passed the Americans with Disabilities Act, and it represents our country's belief that everyone's equal and everyone deserves opportunities in America. There are challenges associated with technology, but also almost unlimited potential. The World Wide Web Consortium has created resources to help with technical specifics on how to make services accessible. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.0 is an excellent resource. For mobile applications, the BBC Mobile Accessibility Guidelines. But also here at Google, there are many resources and many people who have this information of what it takes to make services and products accessible to people with disabilities. The disability community wants to access all the information online, wants to access all the websites and services. We want to be part of the digital world. We want to be able to use the apps in the Google Play Store. And later, we want to drive your cars. I'm excited to see where Google goes and where we all go towards the goal of making information accessible for everyone. And now I'll take questions. Thank you.
Just raise your hand if you have a question.
So my question to Haben is, you just came back from the White House. I saw Obama in the photograph as well as Joe Biden. What was the experience like? What did you discuss?
It was unbelievable. I went to the White House in celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. And there were disability rights advocates from all over the country gathered to celebrate. And I gave introductory remarks before Obama's speech, and I met President Barack Obama and spoke with him briefly. And he used the technology we have here. He typed on the keyboard, and I read what he was typing on the Braille display, and I voiced my responses. And we talked about typing and communication, and then I thanked him for his work and helping to increase access for people with disabilities. What are some of the big commitments the US administration has made for people with disabilities? One major thing the White House was celebrating on Monday is increased hiring of people with disabilities. There are more and more people with disabilities in all areas of government, from working at the White House to working in different federal agencies. In 2010, President Obama and the Department of Justice announced rulemaking that they plan to release that would set regulations for website access. And those are just two of the things, but there's a lot that the US has been doing to increase access for people with disabilities, both in the physical world and in the online digital world.
So Jonas is asking, do you know how the situation is in other countries? How do, for example, non-Latin people use Braille display?
So do I know about the situation in other countries and how they use, for example, Braille displays? There are many different types of Braille displays, and they have the ability to present Braille in other languages. So there are Braille is supported in many different languages, including Spanish, German, French. And when I've traveled in Europe, I've encountered Braille in other languages. Like in Spain, a lot of things at stores, like shampoo bottles, will have Braille labels in Spanish. So there are different things in other countries, and every country approaches access slightly differently. In China, for example, on the sidewalks, they have raised paths, tactile paths in the middle of the sidewalk, so that a blind person can feel with their feet the path in the middle of the sidewalk. And I believe both China and Japan and Hong Kong have made an effort to have audio signals at intersections. I've also heard Hong Kong has Braille labels at street corners. So when you get to a street corner, you can read what intersection that is. Here in the United States, we have a little bit of that in a few places, but not as much. I've also been to Ethiopia, and I know that the University of Addis Ababa has a program that supports students with disabilities, and they're working on getting more technology, but there's a huge need for funding for technology, like Braille displays, Braille printers, Braille books. So every country has their own challenges, but also their own unique solutions.
The question is, thanks so much for telling us your story. I was wondering if there are any Google products that you like using. Also, I was wondering if you use an iPhone or Android.
Great question, RJ. So Google has so many products and services. It's unbelievable. And I mentioned chat, computer conversation applications, and I've been using Google Chat, which I believe is now called Google Hangouts, for many, many, many years. And that has been an amazing way to connect with people since I can't really hear on the phone. So a lot of people like using it, even people without disabilities. But for me, it's been an amazing way, and I know for other people with disabilities, people with hearing loss, people on the autism spectrum, it's facilitated so many connections and has allowed a lot of communities to grow and connect. And for your last question, I happen to use an iPhone.
Amrit is typing, hey Haben, I have a quick follow-up. Which Google products do you not like? Which ones could or should be improved?
That's an interesting question and a really good one. And thanks for encouraging me to be honest about that. So one product that is actually really, really cool and I would love to see improved is auto-captioning for YouTube videos. The idea is fantastic. of having computers automatically caption videos, that creates so many opportunities, so many potentials for the deaf community, but also for the hearing community to allow for greater interactivity, greater searches for video and information. So improving auto captioning for YouTube videos, it would be great if people could prioritize that.
Her question is, I was wondering if you could tell us a little more about your experience transitioning from Harvard after being in school for many, many years.
I graduated from Harvard Law School in 2013 and then immediately started as a Skadden Fellowship attorney at Disability Rights Advocates. And the transition was actually not hard because during law school, I had participated in internships, and those internships gave me an idea of what to expect in the work world. And because Disability Rights Advocates is all about supporting people with disabilities, it is a very supportive environment in getting the accommodations I need for work. So we worked out having a communication assistant who would transcribe phone calls, transcribes meetings, and if there were presentations, or if I go to court and there's hearing, to get someone to type that information so I can have captions in Braille. So the transition was helped by the fact that I had internship opportunities while I was in law school. I'm also from the San Francisco Bay Area. I grew up in Oakland, and my family's still here, and I had friends here. So moving back here after school, I already had a support network. So that helped a whole lot.
Her first question, out of two questions she has, is what do you have to say to people who do not have disabilities and who make excuses for not following their dreams? And her next question is, do you also speak Amharic? I watched your videos and I learned that your parents are from Ethiopia and Eritrea.
My family is from Eritrea and Ethiopia. My mom grew up in Eritrea and my dad grew up in Ethiopia. And they both speak Amharic, Tigrinya, and English. So growing up, they taught me English so I could succeed in education and work. They taught me Tigrinya so that we could talk in public and no one would understand us. But they saved Amharic for themselves so they could have secrets and I wouldn't understand what they were saying. So I don't know Amharic, just a word or two here and there. And I think being Eritrean has helped a lot in my need to pursue dreams. Eritreans worked hard, fighting for 30 years to gain independence from Ethiopia. And I grew up hearing those stories. It doesn't directly have to do with disabilities, but it taught me that perseverance is important, and it's important to keep trying, even for 30 years. So growing up, I didn't exactly know all the answers to how to do things as someone who's deafblind. Often I was the first one trying something. Harvard University had Helen Keller almost 100 years ago. And back then, the technology we have doesn't exist. She's an incredible role model for pursuing your dreams and doing things even if you don't have the technology. So I knew that one way or another, I could do it. She did it without computers, without digital Braille. So I could absolutely do it. I didn't know exactly how. She hadn't gone to law school, and she hadn't utilized the technologies that are available. But I knew I had to try and make it work somehow. And your first question, Susanna, what do I tell people who don't have disabilities and yet have excuses for not doing something? You live only once. Your dreams are your dreams. And if they mean something to you, keep trying to make them happen. If it takes 30 years, better you tried and win after 30 years than not trying at all. If you don't know how you're going to do something, because you're unique and your experiences are different from others, take a deep breath and start brainstorming. Use the skills that you do have. Network with other people. Get advice from other people. Everyone has dreams, and it's up to us to make them happen.
Amrit is letting Haben know that her jokes were a hit. The whole room was laughing, and Gopi was signing with smiles.
Thank you.
Daniel is typing, I'm deaf, functionally hearing impaired. I'm very impressed with your enunciation. My question is, how does the situation in the US compare to other G10 countries in terms of disability legislation and also good faith adherence to the law?
That's something that a lot of people have been researching. Every community has different attitudes towards disabilities. Some communities celebrate difference a lot more. In China, where the emphasis is on being the same, it's a lot harder to be different, and it's a lot harder to get accommodations such as interpreters, captioning, digital Braille. But in other cultures, the individual's uniqueness are more celebrated. So, you asked specifically about laws and legislation. I haven't studied the disability laws of other countries, so I can't offer an answer to that right now, but I'd be happy to look that up.
Ken is saying, I'm also impressed with your speech. It's usually very hard for a deaf person to learn to speak so well without audio feedback. Can you describe your own educational process?
I will talk about my education, but I also want to talk about my speech since people seem to be interested. So, I identify as deafblind, and the deafblind community is very, very diverse. And that includes everyone with no vision and no hearing to a little vision and a little hearing. And I have a little bit of hearing and a little bit of vision. And my low frequency is terrible. I have a really hard time hearing low frequency sounds, or I just don't hear them at all. High frequency, I can kind of hear. And my voice is high frequency. And I think I may have somewhat trained myself to speak at a higher voice to make it easier for me to hear myself. So that's part of the reason that I speak the way I speak. My education, I grew up in the Bay Area, and I attended mainstream schools. And the school had a program that made sure students who were blind or students who were deaf were taught the skills they needed to know. So I would take my mainstream courses with other students and then take an hour each day to learn Braille, learn to use assistive technology, learn to use a cane, learn to do life skills like cooking non-visually. It's all about finding alternative techniques that allow you to succeed and pursue your dreams.
Bethany's saying, your story about dance was wonderful. What other types of visual or oral information would you like to know about from the physical world?
So usually, people will type visual information from the physical world. So when someone's typing, they might use an exclamation mark or type colon right parentheses, or just type SMILE. Friends will also describe what someone is wearing or interesting artwork on the wall. Lots of descriptions. There's also something called protactile, which transfers some of that information physically. So someone could draw a smile on my arm or signal laughter. There's sign language, and I could put my hand on someone's hand and feel what they're signing. So that there's that whole world of communicating visual information in an alternative format. And I knew that. But until 2 weeks ago, it never occurred to me to do that while dancing. So for 10 years, people have been smiling at me on the dance floor, and I didn't know. But I learned, and I'm really grateful to have that additional information, and I'm excited to use it next time I go dancing.
Boston says it's really awesome to see Haben speak for the first time in person. He has 2 questions. The first one is, are there any suites of apps on your iPhone that are tailored for blind deaf persons? And the second is, do you follow any medical innovations that help blind deaf persons?
I feel like I'm so busy living and working and dancing and talking with friends that I don't have time left over to follow medical research. But I ask friends and family to let me know if they heard of something exciting and something new, because I'm open to new possibilities, and I love new research and new developments and learning new things. I have an app on my phone called Blind Square, and Blind Square is a travel tool, and it'll tell you how to get from point A to point B, what's the nearby intersection, what's your approximate address. It's designed to be 100% compatible with the screen reader called VoiceOver on the iPhone. I would love to have Google Maps be 100% accessible, because that has so many features and so many potentials, but it's not at that level yet. So, Boston, if you know people working on Google Maps, could you share this message for me? It's actually not that difficult to make these services accessible with screen readers. There are guides here at Google. So Google has accessibility guidelines, and there's information on how to make those services accessible. I think people maybe just don't know and need to be reminded that people are out there excited to use these services and are waiting to make them happen. Thanks to Gopi for making this happen, and Aprachita, and Amrit, and Grace.
Christy was thanking Haben for coming and talking to us today. Christy is asking, I have a family friend who is disabled and studying to be involved in disability advocacy. Do you have any advice I can pass along to her?
It's really, really helpful to connect with the disability community. So when I was thinking about going into law school, I reached out to the blind and the deaf community, and I talked to a bunch of deaf lawyers. How did you make it through law school? What advice do you have for me? And I reached out to the National Federation of the Blind and asked all their blind lawyers, what advice do you have for me for going to law school? What are the alternative techniques you use for getting your books, for doing online research? So every disability experience is very unique. So my advice would be connect with that specific disability community and get advice from people who have tried that or who have done something with who have done something in a related area.
Sarah is saying, you've inspired us all. You mentioned that Helen Keller went to Harvard 100 years ago. Following your tremendous success, are you seeing more people that are deafblind modeling your success, going to Harvard and law school?
I need to correct something I said earlier. So at the time of Helen Keller, Harvard, strangely, was only men. And the equivalent for women was Radcliffe College. Later, Harvard opened its doors to women, and Radcliffe College became part of Harvard University. So technically at the time it was called Radcliffe College, but it's now part of Harvard University. And more people with disabilities are going to law school and are getting educations. I don't know of any other deaf-blind students at Harvard, but I do know currently there are other blind students and other deaf students at Harvard Law School. And I know of deaf-blind students who are going to other law schools throughout the country. A lot of this is because of technology and because people like you are taking the time to make sure that services are accessible to people with disabilities. I can't imagine trying to have gone to law school at a time without all the services we now have available. So thank you.